Good afternoon from the Long Beach Post, Long Beach Business Journal newsroom. I'm David Summers, publisher of the Post and Business Journal. Today, for our live chat, this is one I've been looking forward to for a while. This is a special one for me. We're marking the end of an era and an outstanding gentleman in our community as our guest today, Randy Gordon, President and CEO of the Long Beach Area Chamber of Commerce, who is last year celebrated 25 years in his position, and next week will have the distinction of stepping down after a 26-plus year career at the Chamber and a remarkable chain of successes and wins in our community and things that you've done. Randy, thank you for being our guest today. I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, David, for the invitation. It's a great opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Randy, I want to start by asking, how does an individual end up from Lubbock, Texas to Southern California? Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got here.
Well, first of all, I moved to California in 1967 with my parents, my two brothers, my mom and dad. And we left. I like to tell people I left Lubbock in my rearview mirror, and it was a nice place to be from. So I was right out of high school. My family moved here in the summer of '67. And I had an uncle that was a big shot with North American Rockwell. So he got me a job in the electrical department. I actually changed the light bulbs. I was in the IBEW union. Some of my union friends would appreciate that. And then my dad got a job at the McDonnell Douglas. And that's how I started here in Norwalk, California. And then I went on to Cerritos College. And then from Cerritos College, I went on to Cal State Fullerton. And so I came here with my parents in 1967.
And Randy, I know that your early leadership roles were at Montgomery Ward before making a shift to Chambers of Commerce, first in Covina. Tell us a little bit about your early career and what led the change to your career focus moving into Chambers.
Well, I think my first job when I got out here after Rockwell, I went to college. And then when I went to college, I could no longer work full-time, go to college full-time. So I was working part-time at JCPenney, selling men's suits. And then I went from there to Montgomery Ward. And so I was selling suits, men's suits in Montgomery Ward. Later on, I worked in the workwear department and I became a department manager. And then there was a program for operations manager. So I got as a trainee as an operations manager. Then I became the operations manager at the Covina store. That was my first big move with Montgomery Ward. And then I was there for 4 or 5 years. And then I got promoted to the regional office in Oakland. And I was the regional concession manager. I was the youngest member of the regional staff. And my claim to fame was putting Jacoby and Myers in Montgomery Ward stores during my era. And so that led me back to a small business owner who was on my board of the Covina Chamber board. And when the guy retired, the gentleman retired, she suggested I apply for the job. So I applied for the job in Covina Chamber in 1982 and got the job and ran that chamber for 12 years. And then that led me to Long Beach.
Which takes us to 1994. Tell us a little bit about how you got to Long Beach from Covina. What was the journey? Who reached out to you? How'd you end up here in '94?
Well, ironically, I'd been in Covina for 12 years, and I'd looked at some changing some other chambers because Covina was a pretty small chamber. So I knew I needed to go to a larger chamber. And I was actually in the top 3 of the Glendale chamber. And I was all kind of destined to go and run the Glendale chamber if I got the offer. And Robin Toll with GTE, before Verizon, it was called GTE, was on my board in Covina. And Robin had worked herself up to the chair-elect of the Long Beach Area Chamber of Commerce. And the chair was Diane Creel, who was president of Earth Tech, the first woman to run a major engineering company. And so Diane Creel was the chair. And so she reached out, and I've spent about 3 hours with her in an interview. And I was so impressed with her. And she knew that I was in the top 3 of Glendale. And after 3 or 4 hours in the World Trade Center, she took me there to show me off the beautiful offices, which compared to Covina was something else. And all of a sudden, she said goodbye to me, and I turned around and she said, "Randy, one more thing. Don't do anything with that Glendale job until you hear from me." So I wound up withdrawing from the top 3 of the Glendale chamber and taking this job, which is the best job I've ever had in my life. And I started April 4th, 1994.
Here you are 26 years later. I'm really interested, Randy, in those early days at the chamber. Talk about some of the greatest challenges, the greatest strengths and successes. You've been through a lot. What were those early years like?
Well, when I got here, the staff had been Diane Krill on what they call Black Tuesday, laid off most of the staff. The chamber was dead broke. The good news, it didn't have a ton of debt, but it didn't have any money either. And so the staff was down to 3 or 4. And so obviously I had to rebuild the staff. And the greatest strength in those days was the organization was really very volunteer driven. Those were the days that volunteers had more time. But the staff was, pretty much they didn't empower the staff. So the organization needed to change from a volunteer driven organization to really a staff driven organization. And that was upsetting for some volunteers who like to make decisions. So it took a few years to turn that around. And of course, I had to go out and bring in members, and I had to build financial strength because in the early days there really wasn't much money. So, and give an example, they had a golf tournament and they had a giveaway. Say it was a bag or whatever. Nobody even thought about putting a sponsor's name on the bag. They just spent the chamber's money. The volunteer wasn't their money, so they just spent the chamber's money. So I come in, I go, well, wait a minute, let's get someone sponsored and put the name on that bag. Oh, what a concept. Never thought about that, because those volunteers didn't ask anybody for money. They didn't want to ask anybody for money. They just wanted to spend the chamber's money. So I had to change that mentality. And it took a while for some of those board members to leave the board for me to really make those changes.
So you get the finances squared away. You're resetting the image, but then you've got a staff that's been with you. I'm sure a lot of your staff are watching this today. Tell me about some of those staff that have been with you for a long time. What the staff of the chamber have meant to you.
Well, first of all, I'll start with Judy Nelson, who's been there 32 years. So Judy that was there 6 years, 7 years before I got the job, and she's still there today. And she runs her International Business Association Women's Business Council. And then Ozma, our controller, has been there for 8 years. She's about my third controller that I had since I've been there. Of course, Jeremy's been there 7 years. We'll talk about Jeremy Harris a little bit later. And Amanda, my executive assistant and special events person, has been there a couple of years. Marilyn, our receptionist, has been there a couple of years. Christine Boss is our new hire, who's been there about a year now. And so that's our current staff of 7. It'll go down to 6 when I retire, and Jeremy will build a staff again in post-COVID world. And so Judy Nelson is the one staff member who's been with me all these years. And I've had some great staff members. Maybe we can talk about a couple of them, but I'll stop right there, David, and get it back to you.
Well, and I do want to talk a little bit more about that. We're talking today with Randy Gordon, who is the outgoing president and CEO of the Long Beach Chamber of Commerce, wrapping up 26 years leading that organization. We're sharing some memories. We're talking about the staff and the journey. Randy, one of the things that has stood out to me about your staff over the years is a pretty remarkable string of leaders that have come up through the government affairs role at the chamber. I'm thinking about people like Ryan Alsop, who is now the CEO of Kern County, was a longtime executive with LA County. Jeremy Harris, who you mentioned, Sean Lamaki, who is near and dear to both of us and so many people in the community. What's been your secret to attracting leadership like that, to bringing people in and mentoring people like that have grown into such strong leaders?
Well, I think a lot of it's good luck and being at the right place at the right time. Ryan Alsop, I think, was the young man who was referred to me by my counterpart in Bakersfield because he's from that area. Now he's back there, as you know, and a great job in Bakersfield running the county. But Ryan is the one who really took the advocacy level up. You know, when I first got here, my job was getting sponsorships and memberships. And so I had to do that before I could really build the advocacy. So Ryan also really started the advocacy movement, and he took it up several notches. And then the great Sean Lamaki came aboard, who's referred to me by my friend Dave Kilby at the Cal Chamber. And Sean was the student body president of Sacramento State, and he was the one student that was on the Cal system board, and he came a lot to Long Beach a lot. But Sean took it to the stratosphere. I mean, to say that it's unbelievable what Sean did for advocacy. And then in between there, after Sean, there was a lady named Janet Wynn, who's a former state senator, and now running for the assembly. Those three people really took the advocacy to an all-time level. And of course, Sean was an absolute superstar. He was like a son to me, a third son, and he was like a brother to Jeremy Harris, and it was very close to the mayor, Robert Garcia. So Sean's legacy is so deep here that I'm just so blessed to have had him. And those of who don't know Sean, he was killed tragically in a car accident at 33 years old. But those four people really make up why our government affairs and advocacy work is so strong today.
Randy, you've been leading the chamber now for more than 25 years. Is that kind of a tenure unusual in the industry? And what kind of advantage does that longevity have?
It is a little bit unusual. You know, the average chamber CEO might be 3 or 4 years. There's a lot of movement. When I got to Long Beach in 1994, I knew this would be my last chamber. It was going from Covina to Long Beach was like going from the minor leagues to the major leagues. It was an unbelievable jump. And I knew I had the right chamber at the right place at the right time, but I had to build it. And being here all those years really helps because you build great relationships and you have great relationships with chair of the boards. And that's why almost no one ever turned us down because, you know, my current chair would talk to a potential chair and they would be concerned about how much work it is. You know, he might say, you know, Randy's going to do all the work. He's going to make you look good. Okay. It's a staff driven organization. And so having those kind of relationships with those chairs, I'm still very close to a lot of them today. And I built so many relationships in this town. And that speaks volumes to how well you can do when you've been there a long time.
So, Randy, tell us a little bit more about those chairs. You've had dozens of them over your career. What's it like having a different boss every year? And what I'm sure you love all your chairs equally, but are there any that you would say stand out? Any that were most memorable or helpful over your career?
Well, it is challenging to have a new boss every year. I mean, technically, I work for the board, but really, the chair of the board is really your boss. The compensation committee is the three people: the chair-elect, incoming chair, outgoing chair. But the chair is the one you really work for. I've actually had 40 chairs in my 38 years because in Covina, one died in office, so I had 2 that year. And then one was transferred to a job transfer. So I've had 26 here. I just recently wrote an article for my Western Association Chamber of Commerce magazine. They asked me to write a kind of a parting article, and the article name was Choose Wisely. And I got that from the movie Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. We remember Indiana Jones. He had to pick the goblet that contained the truth. And if he picked the wrong one, he would die. So he picked the carpenter goblet, the most simple goblet, and that was the right one. So he chose wisely. And so I always tried to get the chair I wanted, to put that volunteer in a position so that the nominating committee of the chair, current chair, chair-elect, immediate past chair, would sort of select that person and then the board would ratify it. And I've been lucky enough, at least the last 20 out of 25 years, to get really who I wanted. It took me a few years to have the people have the confidence that I would make the right decision. Sometimes I might not get the chair in the right order. But for example, we've had 3 chairs from Long Beach Memorial: Fran Henkel, Byron Swigert, and now John Bishop, who's my last chairs. And so no company has ever given us 3. Now, Boeing had 1, and of course, we're going to have 1 Mitra Rogers, who's going to follow me after I leave. But the bottom line is I've had some great chairs. The interim superintendent of Long Beach City College, Luann Bynum, was one of my chairs. Very unusual for academia to be a chair of a private organization like the chamber, but she's a rare exception. I used to tell her that, you know, in a different life, she was an entrepreneur of the year with all kinds of business DNA in her. And of course, it is also rare to have a former city manager. Jerry Miller was my chair. Jerry Miller was the one who gave me a 7-year contract. That contract ends next Tuesday. And so I will forever be grateful to Jerry. And as a former city manager who went into private sector, now he would have never been our chair as a city manager, but once he went into private sector. So those 2 stand out, but I've been really lucky. I've not had a bad chair. I had some challenging chairs when I was in Covina for 12 years, but my 26 chairs here, because it's pretty much I got who I wanted and I chose wisely.
Randy, I was looking back at the special edition of the Business Journal from last year when you celebrated your 25th anniversary. There are quite a few photos of you and celebrities and political leaders. This is a
Don't forget the
remarkable,
Mike Trout. Don't forget the Mike Trout one.
and then the Mike Trout one. That's a good one too. I got to find that. My question though is, of every celebrity that you've met, every politician, you've received many awards, you're the recipient of virtually every accolade in the industry. Are there celebrities that you've met that stand out? Are there honors that you've received that really stand out for you? What's most memorable?
Well, one of the special ones was that I was inducted in the Cerritos Hall of Fame as the alumnus of the year. And that was a really special. I've got a lot of awards over the years, and they're all kind of special to me. I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of famous people. You know, I took all the plaques and the pictures off my wall at the chamber, and I moved it to my garage, thanks to my wife, because they can't go in the house. So I have a 3-car garage, and all of those are in my garage. And I hanging because I had to put them somewhere. And you know, I got a lot of great pictures, whether it's Gerald Ford or some of the other presidents or Henry Kissinger, and great picture of John Wooden. I've had the pleasure to meet him. And so this job does afford you the opportunity to meet a lot of famous people, a lot of politicians, and a lot of people, even actors that might be filming here in Long Beach. And so I have an award coming up next year that was postponed because of COVID. The Women's Shelter has given me an honor that no one's ever given me, and that's a philanthropic award. And people don't think of me as philanthropic because, you know, I only give so much money, even though my wife and I were original sponsor of a room in the Ronald McDonald House. You know, they gave it to me because of all the time and commitment and all the volunteer auctions I've done over the years, I guess. But that one has a special meaning for me because no one's ever given me an award, a philanthropic award like that.
Randy, you mentioned Jeremy a little bit, and I do want to talk about Jeremy. The chamber, you talked about the 7-year contract, but the other thing you didn't mention is this extraordinary succession plan that's been in place for many years that's coming to full fruition next week. Tell us a little bit more about Jeremy and his leadership coming into the chamber.
Well, the good news is I knew Jeremy before I hired him because he worked for Sean Lamaki. When Sean Lamaki left me as a VP of Government Affairs, Sean started his own company, and Jeremy together they started their own company. And they had this great little niche. They had about 20 chambers that were small, mid-sized chambers that could not afford to hire a government affairs person. So they became their consulting government affairs person. So I got to know Jeremy through Sean. In fact, people used to say to me, that was a great article you wrote and recently in some publication. And I would have to say, well, truth be told, I didn't write it. My Sean Lamaki wrote it for me. Yeah. But truth be told, that Jeremy Harris wrote it for Sean, and yep. Sean edited it for me. So I knew Jeremy. And so Jeremy was running the Garden Grove Chamber, been there 2 years, wasn't really looking to move. And I reached out to Jeremy and you know, I had an opening. And so I hired Jeremy, and I remember the day I had lunch with him at O Ranch Country Club, and I said, what do you think? What does your wife think? The wife said I should take the job. So then I knew I had him. But I used to meet Jeremy Harris, my 7-year succession plan, the longest succession plan in Chamber of Commerce history. Now that succession plan became official 3 years ago. Jeremy got into a top 3 of a larger chamber, and I didn't want to lose him. So I woke up one morning and said, you know what? I need to keep this young man. I went to his office. What do you need? What can I do to keep you from leaving? He goes, well, boss, are you really going to retire? And I said, okay, if I retire at the end of my contract, June 30, 2020, will you stay? So we negotiated a better increase. And I went to my leadership, and they gave him a contract 3 years out. And that was it. There was no interview and there's no search. And by the way, Jeremy Harris recently just signed a 10-year contract. He will get this job at the young age of 41. I got it when I was 45. He's like a third son to me, and I'm so happy he's replacing me.
Randy, what do you think some of the big challenges that Jeremy's facing? What is he going to have to focus on under his leadership that's different than what you may have had to focus on in the past?
Well, it's all really about COVID. You know, somebody said, aren't you lucky you're getting out? Well, this is not exactly the way I wanted to go out. You know, we had 5 events scheduled for the spring, all postponed. Lord knows when we're going to have those, depending on when stage 4 gets here and the governor sets a maximum crowd size. So Jeremy has that challenge on his hands. The good news, a lot of that revenue from our chairman's circle is in the bank. And so cash flow is good. But Jeremy's going to lose some members. You know, there's a lot of small business, especially restaurants that haven't reopened. So we have no idea how many members we're going to lose, but we're going to lose some members. So he's going to have to build that membership base back. And then Jeremy's going to have to go to the large companies and say, we need your help because we've lost others. Can you give us a little more? So I think corporate America will come to the table to help Jeremy Harris survive post-COVID.
We've got about 10 minutes left with Randy Gordon, the president and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, who is retiring next week after 26 years in his position and decades across his career. Randy, a couple of personal questions. Tell us about this legendary poker group. This is the most exclusive game in town. What's that group meant to you over the years?
Well, I've been playing in it about 10 years, and I swear to God, I got in when 2 of the elderly gentlemen died in the same year because there was a limit. And George Economides goes back in that group. He is still in that group. We're playing online now, so George is not playing online with us, but George was playing when we did it at our homes. But I've met some great members in that group. But 2 of my past chairs, Jay Davis and Jim Meaton, are in that group. And I have 2 former board members also in that group. So I know the people pretty well. And, you know, when you play poker with someone, used to be once a month, now it's once a week online. We have a Zoom, so you get to see their faces. You really get to know them. You play from about 5 hours and you really get to know them. And some great group of guys. I kid people, it's the only male bonding that I really do each week. And I really enjoy it. It's a highlight of my week. Seeing those guys on the Zooms kind of reminds me of Hollywood Squares with the 9 squares up there on the Zoom screen. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Randy, I want to talk about leadership a little bit. What are some of the big leadership lessons that you've learned along the way that you would want people to remember? Who are the leaders that you've always relied on, and why, and what made them special to you?
Well, you know, I grew up watching a lot of motivational speakers, and whether it was Zig Ziglar, who once said, you can get everything you want out of life if you just help enough other people get what they want. And I've met so many people. I had my early mentor was Ernie Guerrero, who was a store manager at the Covina Montgomery Ward store. He taught me so much. He died last year, and I went up north to his funeral. And he was really a special mentor for me. But some of my mentors have been my chairs, and some of them have taught me so much because, you know, as your chair, you work with them a lot during that year, and you learn a lot about their business, and then you help teach them about the chamber business, because some of them come into this chamber world not knowing really anything about a nonprofit or how to run a chamber. So, but we both taught each other a lot. And I really learned a lot of lessons, whether it's John Bishop, who's a CEO of a $1 billion organization like Long Beach Memorial. So I learned something from all of them. So some of them are still my good friends today, but each of them sort of was a mentor of mine in a way.
Randy, you mentioned the Ronald McDonald House, but that's just one of countless local charities and nonprofits in the city that you and Nancy have your fingerprints on, either as board members or contributors, fundraisers. Tell us about your nonprofit involvement and why that work has been important to you, and talk a little bit about the organizations that you're involved with.
Well, you know, as a nonprofit CEO myself, even though we're a 501c6, not a C3 charity, I really have a soft spot for nonprofit organizations. And I've served on a lot of boards. Probably my all-time favorite board was the Ronald McDonald Board, when my friend Ron Piazza asked me to be the original treasurer. So I was a founding board member. So I was on that board for 9 years and past president. Rotary's been a big part of my life. I was past president of a Rotary Club in Covina, and then I became president of this great club in Long Beach in I think 2004, 2005, which was the Rotary Centennial year. So those organizations have been really special to me. But recently, about the past 4 or 5 years, I've fallen in love with an organization called Precious Lamb. It's the only faith-based organization of its kind for homeless kids, ages 18 months to 5 years. And we are licensed for 40. And as a grandfather of 6 grandkids, right now they're 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, and 8. My grandkids have almost everything. And these little guys at Precious Lamb have almost nothing. Most of them do not have a father in their home. Their mother's in some kind of program trying to better themselves. And I've just fallen in love with that organization. I'm going to be their chair of the board on July 1. And I'm going to put my heart and my soul and everything that's left in this tank, and I still think I got quite a bit left in my tank, into Precious Lamb. I'm also going to stay on the Grand Prix Foundation board. And I want to be more involved in a couple other organizations. Like I really love Young Horizons, which does something similar to Precious Lamb, except they take them from babies to 5 years. So if I have it my way, I'm going to focus on children's charities because that's where my heart is. And I'm going to get as far away from politics as I possibly can.
Randy, you mentioned the grandkids a little bit, but I do want to turn from your professional success. You've had a lot of personal success in recent celebrations, including your recent marriage to Nancy. Congratulations, but you've been together many, many years. Talk about Nancy, talk about your family, talk about the grandkids. What's your personal life been through all your professional success?
Well, I can thank the Chamber and the IBA luncheon for sending Nancy Becker my way, because in December 1994, my eyes laid on Nancy Becker, eyes locked on Nancy Becker, I should say. And I think Cupid just shot my ass with an arrow. And it was love at first sight. I'd been separated about 6 months after a 27-year marriage. And Nancy had been separated a little bit longer than that after a long marriage as well. So the good Lord just kind of put us together. And we've been together 21 years this December. And then we got married a year ago on a beautiful Chamber Conference day at Hotel Maya. And we have 6 grandkids between us. I have 5 and she has 1. And they're all local. We're so lucky. Her grandchild, Eddie, is in Long Beach. And then I have 2 grandkids in Huntington Beach, and I have 3 in Manhattan Beach. So we're very lucky that all 6 of our grandkids are local. And I'm proud of all of them. I love all of them. But I have 11-year-old actress, Emma Gordon, who just got in her first major full-length movie. And she's going to be in a movie called Money Plane, which breaks on July 10th. And she plays the daughter of Denise Richards in the movie Money Plane. And her name is Emma Gordon. And you can look up the cast, and she's down at the bottom.
Congratulations, proud grandpa. Randy, one last question about the nonprofits. With all your nonprofit involvement, I know you're parlaying that into some future plans. Tell us about your work as an auctioneer. You've raised a lot of money for local organizations. What are you going to be doing with that in the future?
Well, first of all, I'm very proud of my auction career. It started in 1990 in Covina when an auctioneer got laryngitis at the last minute. And one of my board members who ran a McDonald's begged me to be the auctioneer in a Big Mac under glass in the City of Industry. I was scared to death. But afterwards, I told my wife at the time, I think I can do this. I did a few more there. And then when I came to Long Beach, there was lots of opportunities. And like I did St. Mary's 15 years in a row, Jonathan Jake's about the same. I've done almost 300. If it wasn't for COVID, I lost about 12 gigs in the spring from COVID, but I'm very close to 300. I've raised over $5 million. I've never charged for an auction within the Long Beach border. I've had lots of paid gigs outside the border. I joined the National Auctioneers Association, and I received a BAS, Benefit Auctioneer Specialist designation. Mm-hmm. And I've got about 12 gigs booked September through December.
That's great.
Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows?
We'll see, but it's there. Randy, the last question that I want to ask for you is about next week. July 1st, you're going to wake up that morning. What are your plans that day and in the day and weeks ahead?
Well, thanks to COVID, my day won't be too much different. Nancy's good about making breakfast every morning. I love my eggs every morning. And then we watch TV as long as we can because it gets pretty negative. And then we take a walk. So it's like Groundhog Day all over again. But the good news is I think I'll spend most of the day unsubscribing to a lot of political stuff. And I'm going to be telling people I'm retired, and no disrespect, but take me off your email list. I would love to get my emails down to a couple hundred a day.
Right. Randy, that's it for the questions that I have. But before we end, I just I want to take this opportunity to thank you. I remember the day in 2002 up in college in Sacramento when Sean Lamaki told me he was moving down to Long Beach to take this job. And I didn't know anything about Long Beach. And then years later, when I got a job working for Don Kanabi as his communications director, I arrived here from the Northwest. And Sean called me up and said, there's a great event going on in Long Beach tonight. You need to get in the car and get down here. And I didn't realize how bad traffic was going to be, but I came down and it was the Chamber Gala. It was the change of the chairs. And that was an impressive event. That was the first night I met you the first day that was my introduction to Long Beach in Southern California. You've been a friend. You've been a mentor. You and I have done a lot of good things together over the years, from state of the county to finding a way to crowbar anything when things are tough. But I appreciate you, and I appreciate all you've done, and I've appreciated your counsel and friendship. So, Randy Gordon, President and CEO of the Long Beach Area Chamber of Commerce, thank you for being our guest today. Thank you for all you've done for our city. That's going to do it for us. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks so much. Bye, guys.